We're here and we're ready, and we're discussing a massive topic today, which is like how to stay relevant as a talent acquisition function in the context of your organization when you're thinking about revenue and you're thinking about impact. And guess what? It's not the TA metrics which we've been dining out on and reporting before. And for many organizations, they're not even reporting those metrics. So a really important conversation. I've had the pleasure of knowing Dan for a number of years, and an enormous pleasure of meeting you, Melissa, once, and then in like 6 times in very quick succession afterwards, because we immediately hit it off. And I'm just like, yes, you get it. I want to have more of these conversations. And so why don't we start off, just some introductions, a little bit of background on you both for people that don't know you. Melissa, I'll kick over to you first.
Yeah. Melissa Thompson. I lead global talent acquisition at Ford. I've been at Ford for just about 4 years, and it's really been an interesting transformation ride, starting from not having a rec report when I walked in the door, to having a global rec report today, right? And really getting not just my team, but the entire HR team in the business to think differently about our data and how talent acquisition can better support the business. So,
yeah, love that. Dan, let's kick over to you, bud.
A bit of a brief background on me. So I was working corporate startups and scale ups for a number of years. In fact, almost 8 or 9 years. Sort of places where you didn't know if you had a job from one end of the week to the next. So you had to sort of justify your living on a regular basis. Like many people in TA, I got laid off from my last role, and then a happy coincidence, Babcock approached me to fix a particular problem. A year and a half ago, we fixed that problem, and 4 months ago, I became the head of TA at Babcock. Quite lucky here. We're in defence, which whichever way you look at it, we're fashionable right now. So there's a lot of investment going in for obvious reasons. And we're, right now I'm part of leading a big transformation for TA where we're actually stripping back everything, getting it ready to build and innovate on top of it. And a lot of what's behind there is how we make TA competitive edge for Babcock, what data we need to make that happen, but also how we show true value in the organisation. So all those discussions are right at the beginning with Babcock at the minute, but they're open to it, and I'm like a kid in a sweet shop right now.
and you know what? And this is why I thought you'd both be such great guests to bring together, because you both work in kind of manufacturing orgs, and it's a really like tangible thing if people are not in the building that need to be in the building, for one, but two, it's like at the earlier stage of maturity, and there's a lot of things like kid in the sweet shop, peeling back the layers, whatever way you phrase it. There's a lot of things that you can go and tackle. So let's start at the beginning. And Melissa, our first conversation came around from quality of Slate. And I don't want to delve into the whole depth of it, but I'd love to just get like why that metric first, how that metric's constructed, and like why it's a good starting place when you're thinking about evidencing TA.
yeah, there's been quite a debate about quality of hire versus quality of slate just this week on LinkedIn. So this is a really timely conversation. 2 years ago, my boss came to me and said, we want to start measuring quality of hire. And I said, quality of hire doesn't have anything to do with talent acquisition. If you're measuring retention and performance, I can't impact that. And she said, well, how would you measure quality in TA? And I will say I scratched my head for a bit. And then I sat down with my people analytics team and I said, could we design a metric called quality of slate, blending together 3 different things? Time to source, conversion in the funnel from hiring manager review to interview, and then a specific question that comes out on the hiring manager SAT survey that says, I received a quality slate of candidates. And Dan, to use your phrase, my people analytics team was like kids in a candy store. They were like, we're creating a new role. This is so cool.
I love it.
And so we started the pilot in January, and it was super interesting because when you're designing a new metric like this, you need to be able to see, oh, that result doesn't actually make sense. That target is obviously not hard enough because we're just hitting it every single month. And so we tweaked it for the first 6 months. And then we started reporting on it in Q3. It is still not great, but it's good. And it tells quite a story. My team was able to put it into Vizier about 3 months ago. So now we can see it not down to the gnat's eyebrow, but we can see it down to the recruiter level, and we can see it at a requisition level. So it's really in 2026 going to be a driver of how we continuously improve what we're delivering for the business.
Yeah, love that. And it's like three elements which are totally within TA's control. And then
Yes.
it's like applying that as a diagnostic to then think about, okay, here's the business challenge, here's the business issue. This is how this data sits and correlates and benchmarks. And Dan, like you're at the start of the journey on your side. What's the first part that you've embarked on when you're thinking about like the first bits of data that you want to be able to capture and measure?
I've convinced the business we need to strip everything back to basics. It's all foundational work. There was a lot of screaming of innovation, AI. Let's be honest, we hear that a lot. It's becoming white noise right now, but we hear it a lot. And what hit me with Babcock, like any complex organization, and we were not as big as Ford, but we've got like 28,000 employees, and we're a matrix organization with a lot of complexity, and we're very federated. So it's very much an M&A company. So you've got lots of individual organizations operating in their own way. And systems don't always talk to each other. People take data from different sources at different times. And Melissa's nodding her head, going, "Yes, I've banged my head against that wall a few times." Right. And actually, as I started speaking to the various people across our business, including my boss, I said, "Look, wouldn't it be great if we could actually if we could start from basic foundations, work out where we want to end up, and work out what building blocks we need to take to get to that point." So the real basic things, we use success factors, and any enterprise system is never perfect, right? So, but like every organization, we've manipulated and configured that thing to the point it's probably unrecognizable. The data that we need out of it, we're not getting. So we're winding that back. We're doing a stabilization project. We're starting to work with our people analytics team, who get really excited by this because they now think they can work out how to report from attraction right the way through to leave. So we're working on all that, and that works through our data warehouse. And it's not what I call the sexy stuff, because when you get into these TA shows and summits, people talk about the great stuff they've done, but the truth is, I'm not sure anyone's really nailed this properly yet, right? So yeah, for me, it's been about stripping back to the basics and identify. And someone mentioned this earlier on. It's identifying what the business want and need. It's not about TA language. It's about the business language, and it's understanding what's going to tick the boxes for them, so they can see the ROI on what we're doing.
Dan, when we're going into
yeah,
next year, we've started talking about how we're going to think about both leading and lagging indicators. So aged reps being the leading indicator, time to fill being the lagging indicator, and really thinking about how do we see the balance between those things, and what's the intervention to make sure that that's happening differently. Are you thinking about anything that looks that same way?
Pretty much, yeah. There's a lot of traditional old metrics which I've said ditch. Things like cost avoidance and stuff like that. It never hits a balance sheet. It's not worth the paper it's written on. If anyone's using it, please get rid of it. Your accountants care about it when you're growing, but they don't care about it anymore when you're not, and therefore your team's going to get let go, right? So things like that. Yes, absolutely. We're looking at the other thing. The reason we're stripping back success factors and rehashing our data is so that we can get a pour of data in and understand what's going well, why it's going well, what's not, and why it's not going well, and start to reverse engineer the things we truly need to do, rather than just chasing after that next shiny thing over there because everyone else is talking about it.
Yeah. One of the things that we're also going to change in 2026 is we've been using Net Promoter Score as the core of our hiring manager sat, but we find that it's possible that metric confuses people, right? Because it measures from 0 to 10, and then there are Likert score questions that come after that, and we find a lot of hiring managers abandon. So we're moving totally to Likert scores starting in January, and I'm super interested to see if that drives a much higher response rate, because we want the feedback. We want to be able to collate all that feedback and say quarter over quarter, this is what we heard and this is what we're doing about it.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because that's almost taking the same ethos as a global people survey, but simplifying it and then responding quick. I think that's good. That's good. That shows proper iterative improvement.
And I think the piece here is like a lot of this stuff is symptoms, right? We're capturing the symptoms. We're measuring the things which are in our control, and they lead then to the diagnostic of, okay, what do we need to then change on the back of this in order to serve like a business goal? And what I suppose I'd love to hear your thoughts on like the input metrics that you measure, and then how that translates into outcomes, and like how people should think about input through to outcomes.
I think in simple terms, a lot of it's similar to what Melissa said about the lagging type metrics and the sort of front up metrics. A lot of what we do, we don't, people start to hang on too many things, but the truth is, when I want to sound crass, when a body hits a project and it makes revenue for a company, all the company cares about is how quickly and what quality level we can hire, right? So I'm not talking about measuring quality of hire. There's all sorts you can do on that, but there's very little influence that we in TA can have on it. Or there's just some things, but the key thing is start to understand how long it's taken to get through certain stages, the processes you're using at each stage, and understanding why it's taking so long or it's going so quick. And I know what I'm talking about is dead basic here, but the truth is this isn't rocket science. I think people over engineer this stuff. Because if you can show a business, and I did this in my last organization, they had a time to hire of whatever it was. And one of their time to hire was when the person hit the ground, right? And I was looking at this going, right, I broadly think that as a result of your processes, you're leaking this much revenue. And I ratified that with the finance guys and all the rest of it. That suddenly sat them up and put a lot of pressure on my shoulders. So then we started to work with the business, and I said, well, look, because it's about revenue, this is no longer just, you need to look at this as a business objective. So how do we speed up that hiring whilst keeping pace with the quality we need? And as we started to do that, we then started to flip that. So we actually said, as a result of what TA and the business are doing, we're now making you this much revenue compared to where you were before. You see, when you change that narrative, all of a sudden the business starts looking at you in a different way, and the discussions become very different, especially when you ask for money, right? Investment. Let's use professional terms, right?
yeah. Good reframing there, buddy, because you nearly hit the cost words.
But that seemed to work, and it sounds dead basic, but if you can get that quality of process, as in how you select, why you select, and then you get that time per step getting nailed right, and you've got the business online with it, then I've got to be honest, you've almost shown your value at the first step.
Yeah. We did an interesting double click at the middle of the year, and I called them look back sessions. And they're basically 2-pagers that looked at a variety of talent acquisition metrics with HR leaders and business leaders and said, is this what you expected? So, for example, your internal to external mix, or your offer accept rate, or this is how many hires you did between the beginning of the year and now, and here's how it shows out by grade level. Was it your intent to hire more down here and less up here, or actually the vice versa is the thing that made people go, why are we hiring so many of the people that are doing the work, but not enough of the people that actually lead the people doing the work? So really thinking about, how do I help people think about the data in a way that causes them to go and say, oh, maybe I should be thinking about this differently. The other thing that I asked my sourcing leader to do for me is take all of the data from the last 2 years and come up with a model that says, this is likely what we're going to have to recruit for next quarter. And as a result, this is where we're going to build the talent pools. And she said, what if we're wrong? And I've switched my thinking, and I said, what if we're right? Right? Because
absolutely.
if we're right, we're ahead of the volume that's coming to us, and we have talent. And if we're wrong, we have a warm talent pool that we'll use when those things come along. So it's been really interesting. I tell my team, the magic of curiosity is how you get to a place where you're answering questions before they get asked.
Yeah. Melissa, I think you're absolutely, sorry, Sam, I think you're absolutely spot on. What I did when I first came in, there was a resourcing issue that was quite big that I had to step in and sort out. And the planning aspect wasn't there. I'm not talking strategic workforce planning. That's 18 months, 2 years in the future. I'm talking here and now and understanding what we need. And all we did, I remember walking in and TA were like, well, this isn't our job. We just react to the plan. I said, well, I'll tell you what, we're going to change the narrative here. We're going to drive it because it's evident the business hasn't thought this way before. So the aim was, let's get them more data driven. And look, they thought I had wings, but I produced an Excel spreadsheet, which basically said, this is the demand you're giving us. Here's the stat graph based on your different category employees, high cost contingents, subcon, core employees, international workers, that sort of stuff. And then what we did was we then started it. And again, very basic stuff. Each month, we got all the program directors together and said, this is your demand. You've got this peak here. You're saying to hire. I think you need to change your shifts, do overtime, and actually we hire at this level. And then we got to the point where we're like, well, actually, there's a skill shortage here. So do we need to go internationally? It changed the dynamic altogether. The business suddenly started partnering with us because we were showing them cold, hard facts. It was not about emotion anymore. There'd been so much, and Melissa, you've probably seen this, recruiters stand there going, we can't get that purple unicorn. We can't get the purple unicorn. Right, we know we can't get it, but there's no point saying that, right? You've just got to give the facts.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. And actually, the dynamic shift we saw, we thought something that would take us 12 to 18 months to turn around, we turned around in 5 months. Because the business were on board with it and they were starting to make decisions based on something really simple that we implemented. Finance then jumped on board with it and started to work out their cost models based on it and all sorts. That's where you start to show value. And it's like you say, Melissa, you get curious about something that doesn't normally sit in your backyard, but you go for it because you know it's going to make it easier. And the last thing I'd say off the back of that, similar to what you've just done, Melissa, we started to move into that. I'm going to use another buzzword, but skills-based hiring, but it's step number 1. I noticed that every time we were out hiring, we were starting from scratch, which is mental, right? We know what we hire. We know what skill sets we need. Let's just start building those talent pools and communities and areas that we can do. And we only started this 2 or 3 months ago. The talent pools have got to a really sizable level, and we're already seeing offers coming in, which means time to start has suddenly gone from 3 to 6 months, depending on the role, down to weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's that tangible business impact. And I think for the listeners, right, whether live or afterwards, that's one of the easiest bits just to grab hold of and say, like, the time to start and the time to like productivity, when you bring in the retention rate in that first year, you couple those bits together. And it's like, that's where we're impacting revenue. And in both of your worlds, like, it's clear because they might be working on a plant, they might be working on a project, they might be working on something that is going to be built or sold. So there's not just the cost benefit and the revenue generation, there's also the risk factor that you're playing into. You are diminishing the amount of risk by ensuring those people are there. But then for every single organization, and Tush at WPP shared this a while back of like his model, and I thought it was brilliant. Every single employee has got a revenue number attached to them. Guess what it is? It's their total comp divided by the number of days that they work. And if they're in that number of days faster, that's some of the revenue impact that you're having, because that's what you're paying that person. And so that's a really great place to start. And when you think about that journey, because cost per hire doesn't matter in that scenario. It's completely arbitrary. If you're losing $30,000 a day by this person not being in the business, and it costs you $300 more to get them in 30 days faster, well, that is brilliant business outcomes, versus obsessing over our cost per hire has fluctuated this year. We better go and, relook at our job boards and our sources or whatever, and, tweak things to massage a figure that doesn't matter. It's just an input metric. It's like, what's then that business driver at the other end? I think the other piece which you spoke both of you to, which was crucial there, was that business partnering piece of actually asking the business, what are the metrics that matter to you? What's the things which we need to work on together? And I love that playback session of it. Was this what you were expecting at the end of it? Because then it stimulates that conversation, Dan, that you were having, where it's like, well, actually, hey, like, here's the different ways that we can solve that problem, which is all thinking about things with a pound sign, a dollar sign attached to it. The bit which I'd love to think about now is, as we're coming into next year, like maybe zooming out from your organization, what do you think the metrics are that matter? So we've spoken a lot about like that revenue impact. What are some of the other areas that you're thinking about of playing that revenue impact back from a TA perspective? What are some of the leading metrics that lead to that revenue impact?
I've actually been thinking about this broader set of metrics versus like the core that we time, cost, quality. So what are my employment branding metrics? Because if I'm attracting the right talent, that's going to help me fill the role faster. Offer accept is a traditional metric, but the way our applicant tracking system works, verbal offers are not getting captured. So we're adding this little thing that says verbal offer decline and blending that in so we have a better understanding of what the offer decline rate really looks like. And then the third thing is this concept of canceled recs. If canceled recs are waste, what's the cost of someone opening a rec? We work it for 60, 75, 90 days, and then the business says, oh, we decided we don't need that. What is the actual cost? And so we're looking at how do we align a cost to that and then communicate back to the business, this was your waste for the quarter.
I like that last one. And I love that because it feeds into the OPEX savings as one of the big pieces that's coming across. And obviously it's consistently within financial reports of listed companies of like a focus, but the frequency that that's been mentioned, usually with AI written next door to it, has increased exponentially over the last like 8 to 10 months. But like that is a cost, and also the hiring manager's time can be involved with that as well, like in terms of what stage has that been cancelled, and then the knock-on impact of like the next rec and everything else. I love that as an extra metric. Dan.
So probably very similar. Again, we're at the beginning of the journey here, but if I was to typically look at this, I also look at revenue from bottom line, but I look at level of effort and then I monetize that. And actually, it's a very broad brush monetization, but it's an easy indicator. So Melissa's absolutely right. Cancelled recs is a big thing. People think that, and it's interesting. I think Babcock's quite hard on itself because they think they're the only ones that are this inefficient, and loads of recs get cancelled and all this stuff. But let's be honest, when you're working in a defense, manufacturing, mass industry type world, everything's driven from the ground up if you're not careful. So it's very knee jerk. It's very short term. I need this in the next 12 weeks. Just go and get it. And like, well, thanks for the heads up. Right. So we see a lot of that changing and the targets are moving all the time. So I'm looking at, and in fact, the exercise I'm about to go through in the new year so I've just inherited our contracts and onboarding team. So now I have ownership of the process. I say ownership, responsibility of the process from attraction through to onboarding. My crown's not quite big enough to say ownership, but it means that I've got an opportunity now, which is quite rare, and this is why I go back to Kid in a Sweet Shop, is where I'm going to be able to get those teams together in a new year, and we physically do an old-fashioned mapping session on a wall, and we start to identify what are the things that we're doing too much of that we don't need to do? What are the things that are going really well that we need to optimize? What are the things we're duplicating, or what are the things that are too manual? And then we start to overlay that with what do we have control of? What don't we have control of? And what can we influence? And then from there, we're able to start to drive that sort of what are the quick wins? What are the things we need investment in? And we build this map that's maybe 2 years in length. Now, like the pot of the gold at the end of the rainbow, we're never going to quite reach it. And we never should do, because it should always evolve. But it's having those what I call basic discussions to identify it, and where people forget it. And Melissa, I don't know if it's the same with you. Quite often, the contracts and onboarding team that might sit in an HR shared service place, the opinions these people can get forgotten about and lost, but they're the people feeling the pain, right? They're the people getting the grief. They're the people that are constantly running back to a recruiter or a manager saying, but what about this? And what about this? They're the ones that can add the real sharp end value. So that's why I'm keen to get them involved. So I know that doesn't really fully answer your question, but for me, it is that time to hire, it is that time to start, but then it's the mechanics in between all of that and the minutiae that affects it. And that for me is sort of where I'm going next. So it really is from the ground upwards.
That thing that you talked about, accept, influence, control, we call it the elephants exercise, like the elephant in the room. So what do we just have to accept and stop gritching about it? What can we influence, and how do we go and influence those things? And then what's within our control? Because I think sometimes we look at problem X and we're like, wow, that sure is a problem. I'm like, but that problem is within our control. What if we don't solve it? Right? Right. Yeah. So that's a big one. We try to do it twice a year because the elephants change over time. Right.
Yeah. And even the stuff that's not in your control, if you can build enough of a case to it, you can start to work out, I sometimes call it the divide and conquer. You split it into smaller pieces. It's again, what was it to say? If you want to use the elephant, how
Do
do
you
I
eat an
eat the
elephant?
elephant? One
Yeah,
bite
yeah,
at a
yeah.
time,
I thought
right?
the same. Yeah.
So yeah, that's the approach I would take as well. So I think it's absolutely the right thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
And
one of the
there's some
things that
quick
we haven't
wins.
talked at all about, Sam, is the university recruiting process, right? So to me, it's got a completely separate set of metrics. It has a completely different flow through than your normal professional hiring. So we've been really thinking about how can we understand those metrics at a deep enough level that we can just go to the business and say, okay, we're 2 months into university recruiting, and here's what's not working and why, and here's what we need to do differently so we can get you the interns and the full-time hires that you really want. So we look at it in a number of different ways because my team knows I love data, but data for data's sake is not helpful. But data that tells you a story and then how you go back to the business and tell that story, it can really have an impact.
Yeah. And it's about looking at like what's the biggest area that you can impact immediately to buy that credibility of whether that's taking a community like your university and your grads, or like we're talking about with brands, we're talking about that next in 2 weeks time on the show, we're talking about like brand influence and then how that impacts your revenue and how that impacts your offer conversion rate, your time to hire and all of those things. And it's like, if that's the area of the business that you have the ownership of and you can control and you can impact, well then go and do that bit and then build that trust, build that data maturity internally so you can go and challenge in some of those areas as well. And I think for anybody listening, like the kind of big takeaway, and as has been for many of these episodes over the years, it keeps rolling back to like, how can we drive revenue impact? And that revenue impact is three things. It's like direct revenue impact, it's risk avoidance, and then it's your like operational savings. But your operational savings don't matter as much in recruitment. The board don't care about that as much as they care about their hiring manager's time or the business's time more generally, or their quota carrying reps time. It's a very different setup. We are 120 seconds from the end of the show. So we're at this horrible point of the year where people start making crazy predictions for what's coming into next year. Sorry for putting you on the spot. What do you see? What should TA folks think about, when they're having those internal conversations when you're looking at January through to December next year? Because we know there's one big trend, but yeah.
I wonder what that is.
I think the key is to stop chasing that big trend and instead look at your foundation. And if your foundation is set, what is the next set of bricks that you need to put on, right? Don't worry about putting the paint on the outside of the house when you don't have the frame up.
Yes. Love that. Love that.
Isn't the more crass term put lipstick on a pig?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's
this has been a collection of idioms today.
It's been great.
So we've hit so many of them. You could just have a roll of sound bites of all of the things. We just need like no smoke without fire, make hay with the sunshine. We could throw a few more in there for good measure. Dan, hit me.
So I agree with Melissa. I think we're for the first time in a long time, TA's now got every excuse it needs to start from basics, to start to work out what it is that's going to make TA valuable. Where do we want TA being? There is currently no excuse for not starting from that 101 base foundation position, knowing the technology that's there. We've also got to know that if by doing that, not only are we delivering for the business, but we're protecting our core teams so that we don't end up in this fluctuation that we've been in since COVID, let's be honest. Because the skill sets we need aren't going to be as numerous, but they're also going to be different. So by getting those foundations right and understanding where you're going to go next, you'll start to have the makeup of how your team looks, operates, and how it should deliver to a business. And the business should be partnering with that as well. And they should be brought into that. Because quite often, let's be honest, business leaders still think a bit like sales leaders. If we need to recruit more, we have more recruiters. No, we don't. We just need to be set up correctly. So I think what Melissa said about the absolute basics, that's where I'm going. That's where my focus is for at least the next 6 months. And after that 6 months, it's about building from there. And in my head, I've got this two-year roadmap to get us to that point. And yes, I'm going to use the swear word, AI factors into it, but to quote you, Sam, in a recent event, automation does too, and the two of them are different.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was actually going to be where I finished as well. What a wonderful segue to close the show, because I genuinely think like we are an AI first business, but it doesn't mean that that is the solution to your problem. And it's like, what's the problem that you have? Do you have the resources to solve that problem? Is it a process change? Is it a people change? And when we were sitting at that, holding that panel the other week, yes, there were people doing some fantastic things with AI. But when you then pose the question to say, what's somebody done with automation or process change that's had a business impact this year? There were equally good examples. I think we are somewhat in a situation, though, that there is going to be downward pressure regardless to show that we're doing both things, even if one of them is actually outperforming the other. The one that's going to make it to the board report is what you're doing with AI, because we're in the infancy there. So even something that hits 30% of the same goals as something else that achieves 100, if you've started that journey, there's the exponential potential afterwards, right? So maybe that's a little bit that plays into it, but I think just so important. Identify the problem, define what the solution can be, and deliver it. And I think there's been a lot of simplicity from you both in terms of the way of thinking about the problems rather than trying to overcomplicate it, and then you can bring in the complexity and the depth afterwards. So a great closing message. Thank you both for joining on the show. I'll hit that stop button.